Welcome in, everyone, to Beyond the Beat with 32 Beat Writers. My name is Zach Hyduk, and today I have with me Matt Derrick, who is a beat writer over at ChiefsDigest.com. You can find him also on YouTube at ChiefsDigest.com, as well as his podcast, 41 is the Mic. If you're looking for him on Twitter, you can find him at Matt Derrick. That's D-E-R-R, or excuse me, D-E-R-R-I-C-K for the last name, Matt. Welcome to the show, sir.
I appreciate it, Zach. Great to be with you. I really appreciate the work that you do over there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've been, we tried getting you on the show last year. We had a little bit of a, flyby. We got busy, had my kid and everything. So I'm glad we're finally able to get you on here before training camp kicks off. We are kind of in a little bit of a dead spot, but on the 16th, I believe you said the Chiefs are going to be kicking that off, right?
Yep. Tuesday is the day that the rookies, quarterbacks, and some of the injured players report to St. Joseph, Missouri, and Missouri Western State University. And one of the Chiefs, one of the few teams that are still going away for training camp on a college campus. So it's an experience. It sure is.
Yeah. We're excited about it. I did want to mention here at the top, you had just posted not too long ago a 53-player Chiefs roster projection over at ChiefsDigest.com. So everybody should definitely go check that out if they have a moment to do that. We're going to basically just talk through what we've seen a little bit from the Chiefs in OTAs and then what we expect from them going forward here in through training camp. And so just touching a little bit on OTAs, is there anything specific in general that you saw or any observations? And then can you give us a little bit of insight on the rookies specifically with Xavier Worthy, Jared Wiley, and then is it Luis or Lou Reese-Zammit? I don't know how he pronounces that.
Louis Reese-Zammit. Yes, he made sure to tell us at his first press conference how to officially pronounce it. Since a lot of us were either calling him Louis or Louis, weren't quite sure. But really, one of the standout takeaways really from from OTAs is that we're still getting a sense of what this offense is going to look like with that rebuilt receiver room. We haven't obviously yet seen Xavier Worthy on the field with Patrick Mahomes much. For the media, not at all. I mean, he was not available at any of the practices that were open to the media. He was only healthy for about 1.5 OTA practices before that hamstring tweak shut him down, and the Chiefs kept him out all the way through the mini camp. Indications are that he should be ready to go by the beginning of training camp, and we'll get our first look. But we really haven't had a chance to see Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and Xavier Worthy on the field at the same time. And that's the look that I think is going to be the most interesting. I mean, that's obviously, one of the other things that really was a standout for me from OTAs was that when Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice were both out there, and they were not out there the entire time, but when they were on the field together at the same time, and at least in the same practice, I mean, you could tell the difference. Those two guys are on a different plane than everybody else in that receiver room. So, that's a big deal. I mean, the Chiefs essentially have added 2 first-round picks, with Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, 2 first-round picks to this receiver group. And then you've got Rashee Rice really developing in, second year. And I expect that we'll see the same thing with Xavier, that he's going to look like he's closer to that plane of receiver than anybody else. We'll see how he fits in. He's got a lot of work to do to build up that chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, but those 3 receivers are going to be the key to the offense this year. And we really just haven't had a chance to take the covers off and really see them. So fans at training camp will get the first look. As far as this rookie class on offense, Jared Wiley is the guy to watch. Absolutely, for the both short term and long term. This is the first really tight end that the Chiefs have had. I think really arguably the first young tight end the Chiefs have arguably had in the Travis Kelce era that can complement him to get him off the field. So that, we remember Travis Kelce at his prime playing like 95% of the snaps. At 34, going into age 35 season, he needs a lighter workload. Now, he doesn't want a lighter workload. He'll tell you that. But the Chiefs would certainly like to back off of him a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, when you're talking about having like a 6'3" tight end like Noah Gray, or even like an Irv Cross Jr. that the Chiefs have brought in, these are both smaller, a little bit faster tight ends. They're not Travis Kelce, and they're not that size, that body type. Jared Wiley he's big. He's got a better vertical leap than Travis does. He's younger. He's healthier. He can probably do some things that Travis can't do. There's a lot of things that Travis can do that Jared Wiley can't. But watching his hands, watching his ability to post up in the red zone, this guy's going to be a target in the red zone, even if it is in some multiple tight end sets and he and Kelsey are on the field together at the same time. But he's going to get a lot of opportunities in this offense because he's going to force his way onto the field. I mean, he is not Travis Kelsey. Let's not put the pressure on him, but he's going to put up some numbers in this year, I think, in this offense.
That is exactly where I wanted to go next and ask you about. Yeah, let's stick on the tight ends just a little bit because with Kelsey, I know last year you mentioned that sometimes they saved him or it seemed like maybe they were saving him at times for the playoffs. I wonder if you expect that they kind of do that again this year. It sounds like that may be the case by what you're saying. And I think there was a time where they pulled him off and they cut to the sideline with him there, and he definitely was not happy about it. So that's certainly true. He'll fight for every snap for sure. But yeah, he's getting a little older. They did give him that contract extension. I don't know a ton of the details about that, but is Wiley the type of guy to eventually replace him should he be gone, or in the time, like, are they going to try to save Kelsey for a game or two or just cut back on him in general? What would you project that to be if you could at this point so early on?
Yeah, and last year, I mean, the Chiefs did hold him back a little bit, and obviously Travis does not like coming off the field, and he will show his displeasure at coming off the field. But that's why Andy Reid's the highest paid head coach in the league, is to deal with Travis Kelsey's heat. But a big part of that was because Travis was never healthy last season. He suffered that hyperextended knee less than 48 hours before the season opener against the Lions, and really, to me, never recovered and really got close to being 100% until the postseason. They were able to give him that week 18 off and let him rest up, and that was a big key to, I think, getting him ready for that postseason run. But I don't think that Travis was ever truly 100% last year because of that knee problem. And he had a couple of others. He had a stinger pop up here and there too. So he was battling a couple of different things all season. The Chiefs are certainly hoping this year is a healthier year for him. But one way they want to keep him healthier is to back off his snaps a little bit. Now, we're talking a little bit. We're not talking about going down to 50%. We're talking about, Chiefs maybe being more comfortable in the 75 to 80%. But when you're talking about how it was just a couple of years ago, he was at 95, that's enough of a jump that somebody's going to take on that workload. And yeah, Jared Wiley for the short term absolutely looks ready to take on some of that right now. And for the future, yeah, I mean, Travis Kelsey signed through 2025. I wouldn't be surprised if he played beyond that. I think 2026 and 2027 are still possibilities. 27, he's going to be 38. I still think there's a possibility that even with his off the field interest, there's a chance he could play that long. But Wiley absolutely looks positioned to not only be the kind of complement in the short term, but long-term replacement, absolutely. And you're also, I think, going to see the Chiefs continue to rest on a lot of these multiple tight end sets and 12 and 13 personnel, because they like Noah Gray. There's a possibility they may keep a fourth tight end. If they do, Irv Smith Jr. is the front runner there. And both those guys are a different flavor than Kelsey and Wiley. They're smaller, faster guys. Travis and Wiley are both bigger bodies, and I think more effective red zone targets. Wiley was just really good at using his body in the red zone during OTAs. Let's see if he can do it when the pads come on. But they've got four tight ends that they like, and I think there's even some younger guys too that could be pieces for the future, even some practice squad guys. But this is a team that is going to continue to run through the tight end under Andy Reid, and they've got some guys to do it this year.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how that works out. I think he's probably under the radar of a lot of people, but those who like him, I suppose, are certainly on top of that. So that's exciting to hear. I'm interested to see how that shakes out. We obviously probably can assume again that Kelsey's going to be the target leader here for the team. I would, especially if and when Rashee Rice is suspended. But regarding the other wide receivers, well, all of the wide receivers, actually. Number one, have we gotten any information or any indication at all regarding Rashee Rice and a potential suspension for him? And then with him potentially out, how does that wide receiver room shake out?
Yeah, there isn't really a lot of clarity. I mean, the best that we have right now is that Rasheed Rice has a court date next scheduled for December. No guarantee that that's going to be a trial date. No guarantee that it will actually happen at that point, or there won't be a continuance. Obviously, these are very serious charges. I mean, they involve
Yeah.
prison time potentially if he's found guilty of these charges. The one X factor to all of this that could surprise everybody out of nowhere would be if there's a plea agreement, plea bargain that would reduce the charges and then take jail time off the table for him. Obviously, if he gets that opportunity, as attorneys get the opportunity, I think they'd have to consider that. But we really haven't gotten a lot of clarity. I mean, the only thing that you can really bank on is that the wheels of justice and the wheels of NFL justice can move pretty slowly at times. I mean, look at Cam Sutton this week. You know, he had an incident, a legal incident for domestic violence in March. The case was adjudicated in April with a pretrial diversion, and it took 90 days plus for the NFL to decide to hand down a punishment. If under the best of circumstances, Rasheed Rice, were to face penalty in December, would he get a suspension from the NFL that quickly? I've always felt that the plurality of outcomes is probably that Rasheed Rice is going to be, if he gets suspended, when and if will probably be 2025. There's no
Mm.
guarantees. I mean, obviously, because as we discussed, I mean, a resolution could come quickly out of the blue, but right now there's no indication that a conclusion is imminent. So, question is, yeah, I mean, are the Chiefs prepared to either play with Rasheed Rice or play without him? I mean, the reality is both. And how they choose the depth of this room, especially when it comes to rounding out the roster, Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, I think, are both players who are on that bubble as far as making this team. Last year, the Chiefs kept 7 receivers, and that was an indication that maybe the depth wasn't as there as much as they wanted it to be, as indicated as by the numbers. But this year, the difference is that Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney might be in that competition for jobs 5 through 7. Whereas last year at this time, they were guaranteed to be amongst the top 4 targets. That's not the case this year. So it's going to shape up a little differently. It's just a matter of how does Hollywood Brown fit into all of this? How comfortable does Rasheed Rice continue to grow in this offense? And what's the comfort level that Mahomes has with Xavier Worthy right off the bat?
Yeah, and it didn't end up being a reason that they didn't make it or win the Super Bowl last year, but there was definitely a lot of talk about the struggles specifically with the wide receivers at times, just letting Mahomes down, it felt like, or not being that threat that they needed to be on the field for him. So you had mentioned, I think, if he had a choice, I don't know if it was you or your partner, Nick Jacobs, on the show, but that he may, if he had a choice, rather take a suspension this year than next year for money reasons. So would that potentially play into any sort of plea deal or anything that he makes?
It's always possible, and certainly with the rookie contract, it would cost Rasheed a suspension this year would cost him less than next year. The one thing, obviously, the Chiefs would prefer if there's going to be a suspension this year, they would prefer it earlier than later. They don't want to lose Rasheed Rice in the second half of the season or potentially into the playoffs. So that would be the really tricky part to kind of navigate. I mean, if you are trying to game the system to time your suspension, earlier than later would be ideal for the Chiefs. But like you said, I mean, a suspension in 24 would be less costly for Rasheed Rice than one in 25.
Okay, interesting. If he does take it, or just if he doesn't, either way, I suppose maybe you could give us both scenarios. But would you expect it to go, assuming Rasheed is there, Rasheed, Hollywood, Xavier Worthy in that order, or what roles specifically do Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy play in this offense? Because for me, you see speed guy and with Xavier Worthy, and you're wondering, okay, is he just going to be a down the field threat, or do we see him as somebody that they go to regularly? How do they fit the rookie in and the new addition with Hollywood?
Yeah, one thing certainly it seems from last year, the way that the Chiefs used Rasheed Rice, and certainly early indications this year, is that they do feel like he is more comfortable and more effective in the slot. So I think you're probably going to see him playing there a lot. The question is going to be, where does I think Hollywood fit in? And Hollywood, I think they are probably going to try and get it to the X as much as possible. I mean, Andy Reid likes to rotate his receivers, so having guys who can play multiple positions is nice to have. And I think they're going to be comfortable with Hollywood doing that, even though it's his first year in this offense. He's played in some similar schemes before, so they like his ability to pick things up quickly and be able to play multiple roles. But I think the X will be his primary position. Chiefs really like the ability to have Rashee Rice in the Z as far as putting him in motion an awful lot. You can already see that, even the prospects of stacking those three guys on one side could be a real threat. But they definitely want to be able to take advantage of Worthy's speed as far as being able to put him in motion and honestly duplicating a lot of things that Tyreek Hill did. I mean, Tyreek Hill played that position as a rookie, and you could certainly see them utilizing him in a very similar role to the way that Tyreek played in 2016. Those three roles for those receivers, I think, would be their ideal. Justin Watson's the fourth guy who can rotate through. And then, rounding out that roster, it's really just going to be how do you, choose who's next in line and who do you want? Nico Remigio, who was an undrafted free agent last year, looked really promising until an injury. He might win a team job on this team on special teams. And if he does, he's going to be a part of this receiver room. Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, we talked about as being a part of this in the past, and both of them have been, I think, disappointing is fair to say, in this Chiefs offense in the last couple of seasons. But they both still have an opportunity to make this team. But are they going to be able to crack the rotation or just be rotational depth pieces? I mean, right now I think that's what you would be looking at for both those guys.
Okay, yeah, that's all really good information then. Specifically with Worthy, I'm really interested to see how that shakes out and what he, as far as yardage and all of that gets. And if anybody, I'm always trying to think of things from a fantasy standpoint, like who's the guy, if I was going to pick one that I would pick, I don't know. So running back then, obviously Isaiah Pacheco, going to be the starter by all accounts. And, from everything I can tell and previous experiences here, is there any indication that that's going to change much at all behind him? You've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire still there, Derrick Prince, who was kind of a training camp or OTA favorite of a lot of people last year, didn't end up doing too much in the actual season. It seems like Louis Rees-Zammit has taken that mantle over this year as far as little hype trains that people who are hyper-focused on guys like that are interested in. So, those four guys I mentioned, do we expect the same thing as last year for the top three? And then where does Zammit fit in?
Yeah, that's the great question. And I think the easiest answer is to say, yes, Isaiah Pacheco is going to be the starter and really can't see him getting displaced. I think he's firmly lodged in there barring injury. And I think the same is true of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, I think he'll be the number two guy, barring an injury. And I don't think that's going to change. Some of the questions, the real one to answer is who's going to be the third down back, because both Pacheco and Clyde haven't really shown that ability in the past to be the seamless fit that you'd like in the third down back, as far as somebody who has really good at pass protection, but can also leak out of the backfield and give you a big pass play. Obviously, I'm describing a guy like Jerick McKinnon, who was so effective in that role for the Chiefs in the last few seasons. Not on this roster right now, not certain he's going to be back on this roster. So then you look, are there some other players? There's a young guy, Amani Bailey, who might fit into that conversation. I think that could be a third down back. If the Chiefs want to go to a bigger fullback style, they've got another undrafted rookie in Carson Steele from UCLA. That's a prospect. Derrick Prince, yeah, he was the darling of OTAs and training camp last year and then just seemed to hit a rookie wall in training camp and couldn't push past that. We'll see if he can do that this year. He did get some looks in with the first team offense when Clyde and Isaiah were both out during OTAs at times. So, I think right now you'd have to say that he's third in line. The maddening player in all of this from a fantasy standpoint is probably going to be Louis Rees-Zammit. I think he's going to make this team. We will see. He's got a few things that he does need to work on. I asked Andy Reid during OTAs about his running style because he has a really upright approach and kind of carries the ball high. And it's like, can he get away with that? And And Reed said, I think he's going to adjust his pad level the first time he gets hit. So we'll say, but I mean, he has got such blazing speed. He has already got the confidence of Patrick Mahomes as a pass catcher out of the backfield. He's not as a converted rugby player. He's not necessarily the conventional guy that you'd say if you're going to go to a running back and say, hey, you're going to get 15 carries a game. That's not him. But as a chess piece, as just a player that you can insert into maybe a dozen plays a game and be a threat on special teams, because he certainly looks like he's going to be part of the kick return package. He can be a weapon. And I could absolutely see Louis Rees-Zammit being a guy that maybe he's not going to get you a bunch of touches, a bunch of catches, and a bunch of yards, but he might end up with a bunch of touchdowns, because I think they're going to try and use him in a lot of different ways, and red zone in particular.
Okay. Yeah, that would be fun. Is he more likely to make the roster because he's part of that international pathway program? I don't remember all the details, but I think that you get a special exception for a roster spot if that's the case.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, and I think this actually is what improves his possibility, is that the Chiefs used their international exemption on Chu Godric as an offensive tackle from Nigeria. So, Louis Rees-Zammit actually has his own spot on the roster. There's no exemption there. So I think that absolutely helps him a little bit, because that means that he doesn't have an automatic guaranteed path to the practice squad. If the Chiefs want to keep him and don't want to expose him to waivers, they're going to have to keep him on the 53. And I'll say, I mean, from what we saw in offseason workouts, he's earning his spot on the 53 right now.
Okay, good to hear. Good to hear. Is there anything at all to note at the quarterback position?
I think the only thing probably to note, maybe the two things to note, is that Patrick Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes. Shows no signs of that changing. He's the same old guy. It continues to make the same old throws that you've never seen before. And that's not changing. The one thing obviously has changed is they've gotten younger at the quarterback spot behind him in the backup position with Carson Wentz. And I think that, hey, the Chiefs have been a team that's been able to win some games and get some things done, even with the Chad Henneys and the Matt Moores, Blaine Gabbert last year behind Patrick Mahomes. But Carson Wentz is, I think absolutely the most polished, experienced, and athletic quarterback that the Chiefs have had as Mahomes' backup. I mean, you really have to go back to like 2016 and 2017 when Nick Foles and Mahomes himself were the backups. That the Chiefs have had a guy like that. So, with Andy Reid, hey, it's all about, can your backup quarterback keep you competitive if you have to play without Mahomes for a few weeks? And I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, Carson Wentz certainly seems very comfortable in this offense. He's played in a very similar one before under Doug Peterson. Seems to be enjoying himself. And the fact that he's embraced this role, I think, is a good sign for the team.
Yeah, it seems to be kind of a good spot for him to kind of sit behind a very established guy and kind of take on that next role in his career there. The over-under is set at 11.5. Last year, they won 11 games, lost 6, and they're currently plus 600 to win the whole thing in Super Bowl. Do you feel like that's a realistic line there? Would you take the over on 11.5 wins, or would you take the under?
I would probably take the over, because I think that this team, more often than not, with Mahomes healthy, is going to win 12 games or more in a 17-game season. 11.5 as the right number. I mean, obviously, it's a difficult schedule. You've got 2 difficult games right out of the box. They've got a difficult stretch down in the late in the season. They've got some tough road games late in the season. So, and the NFL didn't do them any favors. I mean, this team plays on every day of the week except Tuesday. So, it's an erratic schedule. There's going to be a lot of adjustments to it. So, but you look at it last year and you think about the fact that this team won the Super Bowl, probably underachieved during the regular season with that 11-6 record. And yet they also had more than a couple of games that were winnable had they just, been able to avoid some drops, some silly penalties. They were inches away from wanting maybe 2 or 3 more games. And that's dangerous. I mean, this is a team, obviously, that is deadly week to week. But the one thing that may be a bad habit that they've learned last year that I think could haunt them eventually is that there's going to be a point where it's too late to turn the switch. Last year, they turned it on in January. That loss to the Raiders was certainly the wake up call on Christmas Day that they needed. But I don't know if you can risk waiting until January and week 19 to flip it on every single year.
Yeah.
So, but I do know too that watching this team, in 2020 when they tried to repeat, and in that season they go 14-2, they were 14-1 going into the final week. That was a drain on that team. I mean, being the target and having that long of a run, that team drained, and I think that they lost a lot of their momentum by the time they got to Super Bowl 55, and that was a lesson learned for Mahomes and Kelsey, and I think Andy Reid. They've managed things differently this time. Last year there was no talk about run it back. That was the theme of 2020, was run it back. There was no mention of that a year ago, but you are hearing more of these guys this year talking about three-peat and at least acknowledging the history that's in front of them. Mahomes knows what losing a Super Bowl tastes like, and he doesn't ever want it again. So having a guy like that around is helpful, especially when you're trying to teach these new guys that, hey, there's an expectation in Kansas City. You can't let down during the regular season. You've got to keep pushing. And I think it's good to have those guys like Mahomes and Kelsey and Jones. But it's a long, long season, and this team knows that it's got to, kind of make it through the grind if they want to get where they want to go, which is obviously a third straight Super Bowl.
Yeah, yeah. We'll have to see how that works with the new additions and the young blood that they've brought in via the rookies. They haven't really lost too many people, with the only real serious exception, I believe, is L'Jarius Sneed there for the defense. But so it seems like at least on offense, they've added a lot and haven't taken much away. So as we move into training camp, and we'll ask you this one, and then we'll wrap up with our soapbox. And for those of you who don't know, that's a tradition here. And I sprung that on Matt at the last second. I didn't prepare him at all. So we'll see what he has. But as we get into training camp, is there anything specific, any particular position battles or injuries or anything of that nature that you're keeping an eye on as we move into that?
I mean, I think the two things that we haven't talked about that are going to be most important to this team is, one, settling the left tackle position. The Chiefs used an early pick on Kingsley Suamadi in the second round that they certainly hope can be the long-term answer at left tackle. Asking a rookie, to start left tackle for a Super Bowl contender is a tough haul. I think he's certainly in the driver's seat for that job right now. We will find out, I think. If the Chiefs don't make a move for a veteran by August 1st, that I think they're telling us that either Kingsley Suamadi or Wanya Morris can handle that job. Kingsley's the favorite right now, but that's I think the biggest starting position, certainly on the offense, to watch, because that's an important position, protecting Patrick Mahomes' blind side. And defensively, you mentioned replacing L'Jarius Sneed. Trent McDuffie, having him on the defensive side at a cornerback spot and him being able to step into the number one role is huge. I mean, obviously an all-pro last year as a slot corner. He can absolutely play that number one role. He's got the skill set and the mentality to do that. But it's going to be a matter of Josh Williams and Jalen Watson, Najee Johnson, and maybe, door number 4 competing to fill out that other spot opposite McDuffie. Chamari Connor, third safety, is probably going to be asked to play a lot in the slot, but finding that number 2 corner and the rotation behind them is going to be a big thing for this defense. And you feel pretty good about Steve Spagnuolo and Dave Merritt, the defensive backs coach, to sort that out. But that's the biggest question for them to answer on the defensive side.
Okay, and Worthy with that hamstring issue, is he going to be ready for training camp?
All indications are that he will be. We'll see if he can make it through the conditioning test. That's Andy Reid's classic of having to run the gassers on the first day of training camp. And Worthy, I think we'll be able to handle that. All indications were that the Chiefs were just being very preventive with that injury during especially the mini camp. They just wanted to make sure that he was 100% for training camp. So barring any setbacks, and it looks like from some of the videos I know he's posted on social media, it looks like he's okay.
All right, good to hear. Okay, so now the time has come. I keep saying this every time it comes up. I'm going to get like a ticker or a clock or something to play, but we'll give you about 60-ish seconds if you want to count your head or something like that. Give me any sort of soapbox or anything that's been rattling around in your brain that you just need to rant about, football related or otherwise. Go.
I got a lot, so you can bring me back for this one anytime. But my one right now that's getting me is that, especially for wide receivers, it is so easy for a wide receiver to look fantastic during off-season workouts and the beginning of training camp when there's no pads and you can't touch anybody. And I feel sad for some of these guys because teams will hype them up by putting out highlight videos. Fans will get behind them, but they don't get to see all the other plays. And sometimes these are young receivers who are still learning. So if you're a team in the NFL, the Chiefs are one of these teams. Justin Ross was the player last year that everybody was falling in love with. This year it's Nico Remigio. Both of these kids could end up being fine players. Nothing against them. But every team in the NFL probably has a fifth or a sixth receiver that fans are falling in love with because they're hearing everything about him. Until the pads come on, as my colleague Nick Jacobs says on our podcast, you don't know what you got. So wait until the pads come on before you judge these guys.
All right, I like it. And Nick Genova in the chat, if you're still around, there is the answer to your question regarding Justin Ross. And for those of you who have joined the stream, thank you for the comments that you have. Next week, I will try to address those a little bit more directly. Thanks again, Matt, for all those reminders, especially that last one. I think you're 100% right, and we'll be looking for you for some of that information in the next couple days, a week about from now, regarding those pads coming on. Remind us real quick before we go, where can we find you and what you do?
Yeah, you go to chiefsdigest.com and you can find everything there. From there, you can find the 41 is the Mike podcast that I do with my colleague Nick Jacobs from KSHB 41 in Kansas City. You can find links over to the Chiefs Digest YouTube channel where we've got a lot of content going on. And obviously, you can find all the stories and articles at Chiefs Digest there. So chiefsdigest.com will take you to all of my social media, all my content everywhere that you can find it.
All right. Thanks again, Nick, Matt. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody else for joining us as well. Make sure to check out all those places that he mentioned. Don't forget to check out our website as well, 32beatwriters.com. You're going to have a lot of player tracking tools, news summaries, and more over there. We're bringing more to you as we can. Matt is working very diligently on that to improve it. For Matt, Derrick, I'm Zach Heidi. We'll see you next time.